May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be acceptable to God, who is our rock and our Redeemer. Over the last few weeks, as we've gone through the Christmas season, the Advent season, various verses have kind of popped up and stuck with me. And the one from John 1:14, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Christmas Eve service, the incarnation. Pastor Glenn spoke about that, of God coming to visit us and becoming one of us. The one verse out of the Psalter reading, be still and know that I am God. That's one that every now and then, in the midst of trouble, difficulties, whatever, we usually end up taking time and simply being still and allowing the presence of God to come and to fill us. Out of the Christmas narrative, I've always gotten stuck on the story of Mary and the birth of Jesus and all of the events that took place, and then the comment. And Mary pondered all these things within her heart. All of those happenings. And I think in her lifetime, with the events still to be unfolded about the life of Christ, that there were many times where she simply pondered the events that were taking place in this person that she bore by the name of Jesus Christ. The theme today comes from that phrase in that first hymn we sang, ponder anew what the Almighty can do. And I'll come back to that as we think about a variety of things. But there's also a verse in Galatians 4:4. When the time was right, God sent his Son. Paul, in thinking about the span of events that he had seen, looking about life, and thinking about things, and then realizing the good news of the gospel, was able to say, when the time was right, God sent his Son. Now, I have often thought that if I was doing things, there probably were better times to send Jesus Christ to the world. Why not now, in the midst of all kinds of technology and marvels where instantaneous news spreads over the world? Now would be a great time. And yet, I'm not sure anyone gets that much respect for very long in this world in which we live in today. So maybe not. So 2,000 years ago, God had the wisdom to send a person to a region that wasn't that well known, but to a region where all kinds of cultures passed, north and south. All the countries up here still had to come through Galilee. The countries to the south, traveling north through Galilee. When the time was right, God sent his Son. When the time was right, I guess I'm not asking for an apology or asking for anything in particular, but I'm amazed at how our thinking changes. When I was a young man, all I could think about was, man, what's ahead? Future decisions and what life is going to be like, and what am I going to do, and what am I going to be, and where am I going to live, and how many children will I have, and where's my wife, and when is she going to show up, and all these things future-oriented. Now at 73, I'm amazed at how much time I spend reminiscing and thinking and reflecting and going, aha, isn't it amazing how when the time was right, those things happened. When I was in college, there were so many unknowns, and I wanted to know all that was going to happen and when it was going to happen, how things were going to be laid out. And now I sit back and I'm grateful that I didn't know, because also when the time was right, Rhea showed up. When the time was right, I came to Grand Haven. When the time was right, I retired. You know, when the time was right is something that happens in our lives. I struggle also with the timing of various deaths and tragedies that happen in life. And often at the time, I argue with them. Why did my dad die at 62 when I was only a young man? Why did I lose other friends at a particular time when they seemed to have so much life yet to live? Why did I lose that friendship at that point in time? It's now been 22 years ago that we came to Grand Haven. Amazing how time flies when you're having fun. And I often think back about when I was on the cabinet, a district superintendent, meeting in Lansing, and we're, as a cabinet, meeting with the bishop, talking about various churches that are open and maybe where there should be some pastoral changes. And Grand Haven comes on the docket. And in the midst of the conversation, the bishop says, well, who should go there? And one of my friends, the district superintendent, says, Eldon should go there. In that simple statement, my life changed. The plans that I thought were going to happen never came to fruition, and I'm glad they didn't. And a whole new life opened up that I've been so glad the people I've met and appreciated since then. In the events of life, as we look back and remember, there is a growing awareness that God was present in those events. Ponder anew what the Almighty can do. I have also been amazed by the number of people that I have met in my lifetime who have touched my life. The light of the world has been shared within the Church of Jesus Christ. And you have that same experience as you look back over the churches that you've been involved with. The number of people that seem to just be there for you at that particular time. In my home church growing up, there was a young man, 30 years old, who said he would teach Sunday school class for boys. And I've always appreciated what Wayne May did for us. He gave us a nucleus and gave us instruction and teaching. One of the churches, a former pastor came to me and said, Eldon, when you're young, you need to go to Israel. Now's the time to go to the Holy Land. Don't wait till you're an old man like I am. And I'm glad that I did. Ponder anew what the Almighty can do. Another church, there was a couple by the name of Hicks, and I got to double check whether somewhere in the lineage, the Hicks that are part of the family now are connected with that family that was in Edmore. Just a great couple who shared their heart in giving to missions. And then in another church, lo and behold, the custodian of that church were retired missionaries. And I got to know missionaries in a very personal way and found out, yeah, they're human. They're just like us. Any of us could be a missionary. At another church, just people that were good friendships. But one lesson that I've never forgotten came from my church secretary, who was fighting cancer when I got there and fought cancer all the time. I was there and eventually died from cancer, and I had her funeral. But towards the end of her life, I went to visit her, and I wanted to talk about what was going on and the various things that were happening and talk about people. And finally she said, I just want to be alone and I just need to rest. And she died within 24 hours. And I realized that as someone gets near death, sometimes the best thing you can do is simply hold their hand and be silent with them as they separate from this world. And when I got here, man, I can go on and talk about all of you folks. We've touched our lives in a variety of ways, but one guy comes to mind, and I mentioned him different times, Al Van Bemmelen. Many of you don't know or remember him. He was only a part of this church for 3 years when I was here, but had been a part of it for a long time. And I don't think he ever came to worship when I was here. He was an invalid. And so once a month or so, I'd go by and visit with Al. And every now and then, he'd tell me about his near-death experience and how that changed his life, and how every day he prayed for those of us who worked the church, the secretary, the custodian, the pastors. He said, every day I remember you, Pastor. There are those individuals that touch our lives in so many ways that just astound us. And I wish as young people, there could be more awareness of all of those people that are concerned about us. When I was a kid in college, my grandmother always prayed daily for me. She told me she did, and I believed her. Here, as I went through my fight with cancer, I appreciate the community of faith, all the cards and letters that were sent, and the conversations that I was able to have with other people that had walked down this road, and the support that was there. And then there's that ongoing list of pastors that have affected my life, that have been a light in the midst of a variety of things. And I'm grateful to know another pastor now by the name of Pastor Glenn. And over the last few weeks, he's talked about how God has been, through Jesus Christ, a teacher, a healer, a bridge builder, the Son of God, one who comes incarnate, the Messiah. And today I mentioned that Christ also is one who is the giver of the church. One of the greatest gifts I think that we've received besides receiving the Spirit of himself. To Peter, Jesus said, upon you I will build my church. And as we think about the churches that we've been involved with, think of the number of people that have touched our lives, that have been a light to us and to so many others. Because Jesus came into this world to be a light. Ponder anew what the Almighty can do. But there's also in life those tough times, those tragedies, those deaths that come that just shake us to the core. And I've learned as I dealt with my own stuff and watched others that either our faith becomes stronger or we get disillusioned, we drop out. We want to take down all the Christian symbols that we see in a community or whatever it might be. Because it didn't work for me, I don't want to see any symbols of the cross or the Christian faith. People react in different ways. Most of us have had our disappointments in our prayer life. Things didn't work as we wanted. A little story about an architect who enjoyed building homes for people. And people would come to his office and say, now this is the home we want, and we want you to design it, and we want to be able to see out here, and we want this and this and this. And then the next day, he would drive out to the building lot, the property that they'd purchased. And sometimes he would go back to the couple and say, no, I can't build that home because what you dream and envision will not fit on that property. It will not work. If you are gung-ho about it, go talk to someone else. I think God works the same way with us, that sometimes the dreams we envisioned for our life, God says, this just isn't going to work. A motto that I'm going to try to remember: God dreams for us far exceed our best expectations. And sometimes those dreams go in a completely different way. The writer of that hymn that we referred to, 139, Praise to the Lord, the Almighty, the King of creation. If you check my hymnal that I used when I was here, you will find we sang that hymn twice a year usually when I was here. It's just one I love. Written by a German, Joachim Neander, a guy that didn't want to become a preacher, but there just didn't seem to be anything else that worked for him. It kept coming back. He wanted to be a lawyer. He wanted to be this, and financially, he couldn't do it. But he could go to school, theology school, and become a preacher. His heart wasn't in it for a long time, and then events took place, and things changed, and lo and behold, he knew he was in the right place. He died at the age of 30 from TB. But if you walk into almost any church that has a hymnal in the pew, you will find 2 or 3 of his hymns, even though he lived a short time. God touched him in such a way that he continues to touch lives today. Hymn 139, if you want to check into that while I finish up. Almost all of what happens to us either moves us for good or for disappointment. And I think through the years, we come up with just a foundation that we rely on. Max Lucado put together these words for tough times, kind of a creed. I believe God is sovereign no matter what. I believe angels still respond to God's. Let me start over. I believe God is sovereign no matter what. I believe God still knows my name. I believe angels still respond to his call. The hearts of rulers still bend to his bidding. I believe the death of Jesus still saves souls. I believe the Spirit of God indwells in saints. I believe heaven is only a heartbeat away. I believe that the grave is only temporary housing. I believe God is still faithful. I believe God is not caught off guard no matter what happens. I believe God uses everything for his glory and ultimate good. And I would add, sorrow may come in the night, but joy comes in the morning. When I was dealing with cancer, I learned some things, and I found out that, you know, when the word cancer comes to you, it's with you. It never leaves you. When you're sleeping, you don't think about it. But other times, it's always in the back of your head. Even when you're golfing and winding up, I've got cancer. What's the future? And it was helpful to talk with others who have dealt with this and live with it. Events come in our life that's all-encompassing, overwhelming. And one day, before I knew how things were going to turn out, I was driving around Muskegon doing a little shopping, and I pulled into the parking lot of the store, and I got out, and I turned to the west, and the sky was dark, but there was this perfect rainbow all the way around. And it was like God was speaking to me in the midst of my gloom. Eldon, it's going to be okay. It's going to turn out okay. Continue to believe what you've always believed and preached. And I said, well, in that case, I'm going to be okay. So shortly thereafter, I called Glenn, and I said, Pastor Glenn, do you need anyone to fill in? I'm going to be okay. So 2 months to the day after surgery, I stand before you, free of cancer at this point in time, glad that it's over, and ready to continue on for the next chapter of life. Ponder anew what the Almighty can do. And as we move into this new year, may there be those experiences that come our way where every now and then we just take time to be still and allow God's presence to be with us, to be filled with God's grace and wonder and awe, and ponder anew what the Almighty can do. Amen.